Okay, hi, Isaac. Good morning.
Rabbi, good morning. So good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, we're very excited to keep moving on in Matthew chapter 6. As I think today we're going to do one of the parables that are parables. Namely, like this is like the classic teacher wants to teach as a teacher a parable that you'll maybe get, you'll maybe not get, it'll maybe be ambiguous, it'll maybe go over your head, it'll maybe go right through your eyes. It's very unclear. So I'm very excited to break down this parable to see if you or I can make any sense of it.
Yeah, the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 6, verse 22 onwards. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness?
Right. So this is somewhat like the parable of salt and light, right? You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can, et cetera, in 5:13. There's no way to understand this but as a parable because it immediately sets up the eye is the lamp of the body. So Isaac, before I start giving some fun random interpretations of what the eye is the lamp of the body, I'd love to hear what it means to Isaac.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably outlined this very well, right? It has an analogy within an analogy. It takes an eye and the lamp of a body. What's a lamp of a body? It's not like we don't have a lamp in our body, and so he means an analogy there, and then he used the word eye in a different sense. So it sounds like this is it's a metaphor within a metaphor. And so now I really don't know. Okay, it's an eye. I just take this as well. What you see is important, and the topic of commandments, holiness, if love. That's the way I've read this thing. I don't quite know the context of this because what's the lamp of the
There's no
body? I think you've got.
context. The right before this is on treasures, and the next section is on two masters. The context is this. You're actually bringing up a great, like, I think, issue that if someone was going to analyze the Sermon on the Mount from outside the Sermon on the Mount right now, you would think these are very disjunctive, kind of incongruous sayings. There's no really connection between the sound of the eye and on treasures unless you want to make one up. Like when we talk about fasting and almsgiving and prayer, those kind of fit. Those are the three, and they fit all together. But if you think, why is the eye is the lamp not next to the salt? You're the salt of the earth. It's not even clear. It's like it'd be really interesting to try to think of some meter for the way to understand all these ups and downs. But putting that aside, like I don't think there is a official more context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm surprised that. So as you mentioned, right? So we have fasting, almsgiving, and fasting, almsgiving, and almsgiving, and what's the other one? Yeah,
Oh,
and
fasting, almsgiving, and prayer.
yeah, those three come as one section. So this section
Isaac,
includes.
don't forget your prayer.
Since the last conversation, I'm thinking about prayer. Anyway, so this section, it's on the topic of lay up treasures in heaven. And the first part is about don't lay up treasures on earth where moth and rust can destroy. The last section is about don't serve two masters. So in a sense, I can at least see some similarity between the first part and the second part, broadly speaking. But this one in the center, eye lamp of the body in between, it feels completely out of place.
The only thing I'll add to that is just, like it's not necessarily, doesn't mean necessarily lamp. A lot of the translations, lamp and light are very interchangeable in Aramaic. Like we have the word shraga. I don't know if you ever heard that, which is like an oil lamp. And that sometimes is used as illumination. So I think lamp is probably the more literal interpretation. When the King James Version says the light of the body is the eye, and the World English Bible says the lamp of the body is the eye, I think we have to understand that the lamp is more about the light. Like if you're trying to make a parable based on Aladdin's lamp, you'd be kind of missing the point. It's not a lamp that is magical. It's a lamp that is focused on light. So I think the main focus is the light aspect.
Okay, thank you for that. But let's clarify that, right? Let's hash that out a bit. Um, what does it mean? What is light of the body? There are people are blind. There are some who don't have eyes. So by saying that, either
This
the lamp
parable is lost on them.
is lost on them, right? And so yeah, it's lost on them. So can we hash that a bit? Whether it's lamp or light, what does it mean?
Okay, so let us go. So what you're really asking is that there's two parables here, or two metaphors that we have to understand. One is the metaphor of the eye, and one is the metaphor of light. Thank the good Lord that rabbinic tradition will illuminate our eyes such that we will be filled with light by the end of our conversation, we'll have
Amazing.
some of these ideas. So let's go one by one. Let's start with the eye. So I figured that before we even look into rabbinic tradition, let's think of what an eye could be a metaphor for. So I made a list really quickly. And you can tell me some of them might overlap, some of them might contradict, that's fine. So number one, if you just take it literally, the eye is the lamp of the body, the eye could be a literal. The eye is a representative of the health of the whole body. If your eyes are healthy, then you're healthy. That is the worst interpretation, which I think is wrong.
Strength.
But
Yeah.
but we need to start at least. If you can't read the literal, then what are you doing? So the eye is just a representative for the whole health of the body. If your eye is unwell, if you have some styes, or if you have redness or leaking or whatever, the eye is one of the few things, just so you know, like before you like throw away that interpretation, the eye is one of the few things that responds to emotion with secretion. The eye is actually something that does tell your innards,
Yeah.
that represents your innards in an outward sense. The only other thing that does that maybe is your whole face kind of does that, but the only one that kind of brings out to the world is your eye. So while I think, again, that is the wrong interpretation, I think that when we talk about the eye being a metaphor, that has to be taken into consideration that the eye can exude literally and metaphorically what is happening inside. Okay. Next metaphor is positive. The eye is the lamp of the body. The eye is what you see. The eye is representative of that. What you see is kind of what goes inside your body. So the vision, that's what's happening outwards. It's taking in from the outside. So if you think of what are the things that taken from your outside, your orifice is taken from the outside, your mouth, your ears, your nose, but your eyes actually take in the most amount of information. And your eyes, what you see is kind of what you get. So it's kind of the barrier and the permission slip to enter your body whenever you want. We'll see in rabbinic. I don't know if I have quotes from this. Rabbinic tradition very much encourages closing your eyes if bad things are in front of you, because you shouldn't see bad things. If you have like a horror in front of you and you're not in danger, you should do your best to turn your head away. So much so we see in Jewish tradition in the Bible that if someone has a lost object, you're forbidden from turning your eyes away. You have to go and care about that person by not turning your eyes away. Okay, another, that's the second metaphor. The third metaphor is eye is knowledge. The eye is representative of the knowledge that you have. Either it could be moral knowledge, it could be metaphysical knowledge, it could be theological knowledge, it could be philosophical knowledge, unclear. But the eye a lot of times is used as one of those the eye is the lamp of the body. The eye is the place where all the knowledge comes in.
The connection, like how does eye even connect to knowledge? I would want to think the head is what connects with knowledge. Like what is it? Like,
well, think actually, if you look throughout the Bible, what's the way to say knowledge is with the heart. It was never the brain that was really connected with that. So the eye is, we'll see like the all-know. You ever think of like the all-knowing eye? The eye is something that becomes like, because it sees all, it almost has like this omniscience to it. So I think it does, like, you're actually pointing out that like the brain has this metaphor, the eye has this metaphor, the hands, the right hand that will take the Israelites out of Egypt is an all-powerful hand. So we generally don't see all-powerful stomachs. We don't see all-powerful chins, but we do see all-powerful eyes. We do hear all-powerful ears, all-powerful brains, all-powerful hearts, and all-powerful hands. So definitely the eye, maybe it's not singled out as much as we would like, but the all-powerful eye, the all-seeing eye, the all-knowing eye is definitely a metaphor that we could understand. And okay, so next one, the eye can be the ability to learn. So the eye is the lamp of the body, the way to kind of light up your body. We'll talk about light means in a moment, but the more that your eye, it can bring information in that you could decipher, that you can make part of yourself or reject as part of yourself, as opposed to my second metaphor as what comes to your body. The eye is the barrier that allows some things to come in and not allows you to learn, and such that things become parts of you. If you think of your eye as the ability to upload, I actually saw online that if you wanted to imagine how much information is getting uploaded to your eye at every moment, you can actually put that into megabytes and gigabytes, etc. So too, but if you think about that, certain things you're getting uploaded, some things get uploaded into your short-term memory, certain things get uploaded into your long-term memory, and some things become part of your identity. So that, I think this will be our, what are we up to? Our fourth way, the ability to learn. And the last one is the eye is a lot of times representative of the evil inclination. The eye is the way that you can act bad. your hands are one way, but the way that your hands kind of get grubby is first by using your eyes to see the evil things that you might want to be. If you want to be gluttonous, or if you want to do any of the 7 sins, the first way is to see what you're going to do. So the eye is representative of temptation, very much
See,
what Jesus went through in the desert, that we see that he was able to kind of want things more than you have access to. It's outside of you, and it allows you to be tempted for good or for bad. So those are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 interpretations. I'm sure if you and I sat together for another hour, we could think of 5 more, but I think it's a good start to understand eye.
so how does, okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for that start. That's really helpful for this, this 5-tiered approach, or the 5-tiered options for the eye. What does it have to do, like, how would this apply to blind people? In Jesus's time, there were blind people. So are they not part of all this? They are completely.
Metaphors don't always work for blind people.
See.
I mean, think about a metaphor. The whole idea of a metaphor is you're trying to take like a Socratic definition. Imagine you have a table, and the Aristotelian definition of a table will be, let's say, 3 legs and a surface. What about the broken table that only has 1 leg? I don't know. It's a bad metaphor. You don't want to use the table as a metaphor. So a blind person is a metaphor for a blind person. Could be like, oh, what if you can't see the bad? That's another metaphor. But I think we can't be so modern to worry about the minority and the exceptions in order to define the metaphor. It messes up the metaphor.
I don't like, so were metaphors were metaphors so common within the ancient Judaism?
100%. Forget ancient Judaism, all ancient cultures. Whenever you have a level of artistry or poetry, then you get the idea of taking language to the next level. Don't forget, even if you think of the ancient Sumerian or Akkadian beginnings of language, it would have started with a pictograph, with a tree, and that tree represents most languages until you get a word. So the whole idea of language sprouting out and all languages being cousins and languages kind of overlaying, it's all about that there's somewhat an overlap, and I could pull out the general idea and extract it in order to make generalizations for the whole. So the whole idea of language itself is built on poetry and metaphors and cousins of different languages.
Yeah,
linguistics.
because I'd want to think that that Jesus could have said this thing using a simpler words, instead of just being straight,
So that was the opening. He definitely, whenever it's like when you read Shakespeare and you say, couldn't just Shakespeare said this more easily? And the answer is yes, but it's not as beautiful. And B, this is a way that a pedagogue teaches in a way that could have multiple levels for multiple hearers. So the fact that Jesus is able to articulate metaphors in a way that people could have different interpretations allows for Jesus' message to be more broad. If you imagine a sentence that's said to a child and the same sentence that's said to an adult, you understand that a sentence could work on 2 different levels. But what about a metaphor? You can have the same metaphor, go back to it and come again and come to a different idea. Imagine the first time you read Matthew or John or Luke or whatever, any book in the New Testament. And now you read it the second time. The fact that you have all the additional verses that you've read will allow you to have a deeper understanding of even the verses you had in the first time. So all these things work on levels. Let me give you 2 rabbinic texts, just because I thought they would be entertaining, number 1, that talk about eye. So here's number 1. This is from Brachos, both of them on Brachos 20a. Rav Gidl's practice was to go and sit next to the entrance of the women's mikvah. Women, when they menstruate in Judaism, they go into the mikvah before they get relations again. This man would sit next to the mikvah. That's like the worst thing you could do, because you got to realize in the mikvah, you're getting naked. So he would stand outside before they go and dress. But you have to imagine the inappropriateness, the impropriety of this action. So he would stand outside the mikvah in order to instruct the women about how to, I guess, get naked and jump into the mikvah, make sure their hair is whatever, and make sure they jump into the ritualarium, make sure they get what we call in Christianity baptized, in Judaism immersed. He would say to them, immerse this way, immerse that way, here's the law, here's how you do it. The rabbi said to him, aren't you afraid of the evil inclination? You're literally going and talking to women right before they get naked. Aren't you going to imagine how they get naked? He said to them, they seem to me just like white geese. They do not entice me at all. So first, we have the idea that the eye can be overcome. He says that I have complete control of my evil inclination, of that which the information comes into my eye will make me, I see these women, I'll explain to them how to get naked, how to get underwater. But for me, either I'm so old, I don't have such a libido anymore, or it's that I have perfect control. And this might be set up as a paradigm of how the eye should be used. The eye should be used for the good, to instruct to do good, but it must not be taken to the next level of evil inclination. Okay, one more, just 'cause I think this will be entertaining. So the very next line in the Talmud, in the Gemara, it says, Rav Yochanan was accustomed to sit next to the entrance of the women's mikveh, of the women's ritualarium. So we would think he's doing the same thing as Rav Gidl did to instruct people, but no, he had another reason. He explained when Jewish women emerge from the ritualarium, from the mikveh, they look at me and they will have children as beautiful as I. The rabbi said to him, aren't you afraid of the evil inclination that these women just got out from being naked? Maybe you'll have these evil thoughts. You're not allowed to have these thoughts. He says that I'm a descendant of Joseph, and we know Joseph with the wife of Potiphar. He was able to overcome his evil inclination, not that relation with them, and the evil inclination does not reside over people from the line of Joseph. So therefore, I don't have to worry about it. So we see two really awesome things about genetics from this will be the 2nd and 3rd century, that A, they believe that moral upbringing could be inherited from your father. He says, because I'm from the line of Joseph, we are inherently more moral people, and we don't go to that evil next step. But number 2, he says, that which your eye sees could then be imparted to your children. Because these women, after they go to the mikveh, they're supposed to have relations with their husbands, and that egg that is inseminated will be a little bit impacted by the beauty that they saw in Rav Yochanan, and therefore they have more cute kids, which who doesn't want more cute kids? So here we see another, I thought you'd be entertained with this. Here we see another idea of your eyes being able to impart genetic material in 2 cases, one by Joseph, being in part the moral upbringing, and 2, by being in part more cute kids by what your eyes see. But this is only showing you how important the eyes are. In both these situations, the eye has no power because of Joseph, or the eye has complete power to change your genetics. So I thought those are really 2 great examples.
How do you respond to that? What do you say to that?
This is for 2nd and 3rd. So whenever you read 2nd and 3rd century science, you got to go, ha, 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 very interesting, let's move on. But the actual science is yeah, it's stupid. They're wrong about genetics. But they only realized they're wrong at the end of 19th century that they're wrong. So it took them another 1600 years to realize they're wrong. But what's even more important is that we see, for our purposes, that here is how the eye was understood in the 2nd and 3rd century. This is the power of the eye. It could change genetics. It could be overcome only through the righteousness of a patriarch. So I feel like these are very important messages. If you want to understand the power of the eye, we see from Rabbi Yochanan, a Palestinian Israeli rabbi of the 2nd and 3rd century, who was very important, that this is how he imagined the eye working in that idea, that he took the idea that it can be the evil inclination, or it could be completely overcome. So I think those are really, really edifying texts for the eye. Okay, so I think we have a good understanding of the potential metaphor of eye. Mm-hmm. I guess there are 5 we could add. The eye is an imparter of genetic material.
That's very interesting distinction here.
Okay, so now let's go to the lamp of the body, or more specifically, the light of the body. So Isaac, I'll start with you again. When you hear light and darkness, the light, because don't forget, this metaphor is not only light, it's darkness, but your whole body would be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is darkness? So this is not only a metaphor of light, it's a metaphor of light versus darkness. So let's start with you, Isaac. What does light mean? Or darkness, whatever you want.
At least as a Christian from the 21st century, light is about shining the light of Jesus. Darkness is about the absence.
Okay, so let's be more specific though. We're saying sharing the light.
Shining the light of Jesus.
Shining the light of Jesus. What does that mean? I'm asking what that phrase means.
Being the hands and feet of Jesus in this world, which is his love.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Being the hands and feet of Jesus in this world, which is being people of love and kindness and compassion and humility, and the Sermon on the Mount. It's being meek and being humble and being kind and being polite and being, honoring God.
I think you're saying 2 separate things though right now, right? So let's say one you're saying the evangelical proselytizing Isaac side. That is that what is light in the world? It's sharing the light. That was concept A. Spreading it with your hands and feet. Concept B, you said, is that there's a light of Jesus. It could be moral. I think you're saying morality or being good. So those are 2 separate concepts, though.
Okay, let me clarify. Right? So I start with the assumption that, again, going back to John and Matthew, that so when I say the light of this world, it's being the hands and feet of Jesus, as in being the people who embody the Sermon on the Mount. as being people of kindness, politeness, and yes, it does shape, it's this belief system which does shape the way in
I
which
love how you keep saying politeness, because the one thing I think kindness, I would, if I was going to define Jesus so far, I would keep saying, you know what I'd say, super arrogative, going beyond the letter of law. But
yeah.
I wouldn't call him polite.
So
We see so many examples of him not being polite. I think it's really interesting how you see politeness as part of the definition. I think he tries not being polite. He tries to be stark. He's trying to be super arrogant. He tries to be humble,
yeah.
but like to spread the word in a, I don't want to say militant way, but in a way like, this is the truth. You got to do it. So I wouldn't call it polite. It's so interesting to use polite.
Yeah, so but that's Jesus, and we also take him to be God and man, so that puts him on a different pedestal. And then he says, "Blessed are the meek." But by meek, by definition, means that. But now again, by meek, by definition, means to say, again, humility and humility, or not, or to not allow place for pride or for arrogance. So anyway, so in terms of light, I would look at this as being, being people who radiate His love and His life to the world, which is being a people of compassion, of empathy, of meekness, of humility, of love, of gentleness. Pauline speaks about the 9 fruits of the Spirit, and then one of that is meekness, gentleness, kindness, politeness, love, and he goes on. So that's what this is my.
Light is the good stuff, like the fluffy cotton, the beauty, the nice things. Like I say, you could tell me, like, I feel that you're saying it so broadly. Like for you, light wouldn't necessarily be any different for any religion. It's just the goodness, the good.
Yeah,
Like if you said the eye is the good of the body, you would have been okay with that, because you're really kind of describing, like in a philosophical sense, the good.
Can I quote my best friend Paul for a second, please?
Yeah, I would love for you to quote your best friend. I feel like your best friend's been dead for a while, so I feel like you might need some soothing.
Galatians chapter 5, verse 23, 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control.
That's the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah,
That's
so
light
that's
of the Spirit.
yeah, okay. So that's kind of what I'm, so when I mean, so being people who value this, it results in fruit, light. They're all analogies to to a deeper. I mean, I look at them as all analogies, and so against such things there is no law. And those who anyway, so that's, I was looking from that definition, as in he lays out these 9 fruits of the Spirit, and kindness is one of the things he values. And again, growing up in that
I feel
tradition.
like Isaac, I would go and ask you for you now to differentiate fruit from light. That's what my literalist side would do.
And they both
My
just
exegetical side.
and they both just 2 different metaphors. They're trying to get to the same thing. They're trying to get to the same thing, like salt, light, fruit. I mean, what is it? I mean, they're all metaphors trying to get at the same thing, but coming at this in different ways. Paul uses the language of fruit. Jesus speaks about salt and light. I mean,
Okay, very interesting. So let me, so again, like I think when you talk about light and darkness, it's so universal to all religions. It's really hard to speak about it almost from a uni-religion perspective. When we only talk about the Abrahamic traditions idea of light, it's almost crazy. Like when you think of the Hindu traditions around light, they're probably even more stronger than religion. Like, I think that when people think of light festivals, the first thing they do think of is Hindu religions. In even Judaism, where we have Hanukkah, which is the festival of light, that's a rabbinic festival. We didn't even have one from the start. But I think to start, let's talk through the ideas of light. So I have a couple. I want to bring you 2 Gemaras, and then I think we could bring out a couple of ideas. So here's number 1. When people finish studying in the study hall, they used to say to one another, it's a whole beginning, but then it says, may your heart ponder and achieve understanding. This is from Brachos 17a. May your mouth speak wisdom. May your tongue bring forth song. And here's the part which I thought, an overlap of eyes and light, which would be exciting. And may your eyelids look straight before you. And may your eyes be enlightened, be illuminated with the light of the Torah. And may your face shine like the brightness of the sky. May your lips utter knowledge, and your kidneys, yes, kidneys, rejoice in righteousness, and your feet run to hear the words of the Ancient of Days. So over here, I think we have it clear that light in this situation would be Torah, or be the teachings of God. So when you speak from either an antinomian perspective, and or a perspective of not looking at the legalistic side of religion, it's hard to speak about the letter of the law, the actual prescriptions and proscriptions. But at least the way that this third century Palestinian rabbi understood it was that they understood that the light is the Torah, the actual ideas, the ideas of the Bible that God handed to people. Another idea, I thought you would love this one. This is from, where's this one? I have no clue where it's from. This one's from the Palestinian Talmud, Brachos, I think 8. Okay, so it says that when Adam, before he sinned, Adam, according to rabbinic tradition, was very tall, but he was so tall and so, I guess, having a different consciousness and different understanding that Bayom Harishon Haya Adam, on the first day, Adam was able to see from one side of the world until the other because of this ancient light that God created the world with that will only bring back at the messianic times. So there's this idea that there's a light that's saved for the righteous that they will get in the next world, that Adam, the first Adam, had access to in the beginning of the world, and then messianic times will have access again. I think that light would refer to the truth. And we have to think about what Jesus is trying to kind of teach a lot of times. I wouldn't say Jesus is trying to teach you how to be a nice person. I wouldn't teach all the things that you listed aren't the Jesus that I see. The thing that I see is that Jesus is trying to teach his truth. His truth is that the kingdom is nigh. The messianic era is here, and you have to live a different life. You don't have to be nicer. You don't have to be meaner. You don't have to be upper. You don't have to be downer. You have to be different. You have to live a different life because you recognize that God is in your life at a different level. And I think in rabbinic tradition, that is what we call the light. The light is the world is created with this truth. And eventually, messianic era, we will get this truth again. And righteous people are able to see this truth even during their life. And righteous people will access this light when they're dead. So the light is the truth. The truth in a sense of really understanding the world. I think when we talk about philosophers or metaphysicians, and we talk about theologians, a lot of times when we talk about, Catholicism versus Protestantism, Orthodox Judaism versus other branches of Judaism, a lot of times we're saying, like, who's right? I don't know. Which one is the right one? So I think Jesus wants you, the light is the right one. Whatever branch is the one that properly represents Jesus and the views of truth, then that would be light. So this would be the eye. The eye is the ability to access the information, to have the truth of the world, and that truth would then fill up your body. Namely, your body will be part and parcel of the light. If you don't have that truth as part of you, then your body is part and parcel of the darkness. There's no middle ground. And again, usually we keep speaking about Jesus as not having gray, and this is another example of a lack of gray. That normally you would say your body is if you would ask a person today and say, let's imagine there's a parable of light and darkness, you say your body is light and darkness. There's good things about you, there's bad things about you, there's an evil inclination, there's a positive inclination, there's smart things you do, there's dumb things you do, there's moral things you do, there's immoral things you do. Jesus doesn't talk in those ways. Jesus then goes, but I think this is the point where he says, if your eye is unhealthy, if you're taking in these wrongful truths, these evil inclinations, your whole body will be full of darkness. This is the main point. I think the point is not the parable of the eye as lamp of the body, but the second half is the main parable, that your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light is in your darkness, how great is the darkness? That Jesus is saying that there's no gray area, like he always says. And again, that you always ask me, there has to be a gray area. This is not practical. Pragmatism tells us that this is not really something that you can prescribe, that you can keep. But I say Jesus doesn't speak in a pragmatic way. He doesn't mind. He'll tell you, say, this is how it is. You don't like it, go fly a kite. And this is where the politeness ends. But I feel verse 23, but if your eye is unhealthy, whatever our parable means of our 5 to 7 ways, your whole body, absolutely your whole body will full of darkness. And therefore, he actually, so that's one point. I think the only thing I want to add, would you like to ask anything or say something?
I'm just thinking this through. This is profound. Okay. Thank you. So if you could clarify, right? So we quoted Paul. Paul's quoted about kindness, goodness, gentleness, meekness, and that's traditionally what I've heard of the fruits of the Spirit. do you see a difference between, okay, firstly, do you see a difference between fruit of the spirit and light? And then do you see a difference between, Paul outlines these 9 different fruits of the spirit, again, but Paul brings his own assumptions and things into it, but based on what you've seen so far,
So I
what?
think I'm going to give you a little bit of a long-winded answer, but in medieval tradition, in Muslim and Jewish medieval philosophical, Neoplatonic, Aristotelian traditions, there's always a question about when you do a commandment, when you be nice, are you being nice because that is a preparatory action that leads you to be the right kind of person, to have the right values, or is there inherent value in that preparatory action? I think that's the kind of question you're asking me. Is there value inherently in being polite, or is a person who sees the truth going to be polite? And if you're not polite, you probably haven't seen the truth, and that's representative, indicative of a sickness that you have. So I think there's the same question here. So for example, like in Jewish tradition, Maimonides says, why do we pray? Prayer for him is not about beseeching God, at least in a general sense. In the Guide for Perplexed, he lists many commandments, and among them prayer, being that these are ways to live a good life, such that you can accumulate true ideas. And this is how I'm identifying the light in Jesus. So I would say for your exact example, the Pauline examples, they're important. If you don't do those things, then you probably don't have the truth in you. You probably have the darkness in you. But those things don't have inherent value in and of themselves. They can only be representative of your inner truth and or examples of you doing the inner truth. But let's say you're a monk living by yourself in a forest and you never see a human being and you're not given a chance to be polite. At least from these kind of from I don't want to skip religion again, but from a Theravada Buddhist perspective, that is the way to achieve truth. And we know they're Christian monks. I've watched some videos of watching just the Christian monks. They're very boring. Just sit there all day. And these monks, they see the way to align with Jesus is not through engaging other people, not through being evangelical and proselytizing and spread with your hands and your feet the good word, but by connecting through Jesus or connecting with God directly. So do you have to be polite in a Pauline sense if you're a Christian monk? Again, I'm not saying the ascetic life of a Christian monk is the way that you should be. And I'm not saying a Catholic father and pulling off that level of asceticism the way you should be. But I think that the highlighting of asceticism in Christianity, if anything, is saying that I need to separate the physical things from my life. And you could go to an extreme. You could literally live in a forest and live on bugs and wear a loincloth and live in a desert. So the whole question is, how necessary is it to use your hands and your feet, as you said, and to be polite? It's a good question.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. But can I rephrase that? So when Paul wrote this as a first century, second century Jew, as who grew up in the Jewish faith, the Pharisee, and the way he outlines himself, what did kindness mean to him? Because when he put these words, but I see what you're saying about, do people want to live an ascetic life and then can they just not have contact or not engage? Well, that's all well and fine. But from Paul, right? Like if you peel back all the layers, go back to him. What did kindness, politeness, all these things mean to him?
Well, I think again, like the division that I'm making, this bifurcation between it being representative of your inner versus doing, is definitely more a philosophical separation. If I specifically framed it from a medieval Muslim and Jewish perspective. When you look at the rabbis of the first, second, and third century, giving charity to the poor had value because you're helping the poor, and you should alleviate suffering whenever you could, which obviously parallels
Amen. Mhm.
whatever Jesus' attitude. And again, that's actually something that we don't think about today as much. Can we alleviate people's suffering? But a lot of times we think about how can I do charity, not how could the impact of my charity be game changing. So to alleviate suffering was always a value. So I think Paul was definitely speaking from that perspective. And I think that when I speak from a philosophical perspective and superimposing upon Jesus, I'm more putting a philosophical conversation onto how to understand this, because I keep noting his black and whiteness about the way his attitude. And I think when you speak about your whole body will be full of darkness, that's crazy. It's
Great.
too much. It's too far. No person aside from a son of God or a God could be so pure of a Amida. A lot of times, Maimonides says that in general, if you're one way too far or one way the other way, that's a problem. What happens if you give away all your money? That's bad. What happens if you're stingy, keep all your money? That's bad. So you should give away part of your money. It's what we call in Aristotle the golden mean. So the idea is you're supposed to be gray. You're supposed to be in the middle. You shouldn't spend all your time with your family. You shouldn't spend all your time learning. The whole idea of this ascetic Christian lifestyle is very anathema to Jewish tradition. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to have babies. You're supposed to worry about the next generation. But if you live in the Messianic era, I agree. It doesn't make sense to have babies. You're there. But Judaism is always seeking out the Messianic era. So I feel like that attitude of making sure that we have this golden mean, this middle area, is something that's lost on Jesus completely. And it makes sense. If you live in a Messianic era, it doesn't make sense to be gray anymore. Whenever you think about even the idea of going to the bathroom is such a physical world thing. It's something that the rabbis there's so many laws about going to the bathroom. And I'd be very surprised if I saw a parable in the New Testament about going to the bathroom. Can you speak words of Torah in the bathroom? What bracha do you say in this? When you go to the temple, the Kohen Gadol would go in to immerse himself after he had number 2. He'd wash his hands and feet after number 1. All these rules about bathrooms are very about pragmatic in this world. So Jesus would say, why are you going to the bathroom? Go worship God. I feel like it's almost like a different topic. And again, I can't tell you about the pragmatism of it, about where do we find the happy medium? Should we just go live in a forest? Should we not have a family? And again, this is why I'm very sympathetic to Catholicism that sees this ideal not having babies. Because why would you? What a waste of time. There's no bigger waste of time than taking care of a baby. Unless you care about the next generation.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say one before we go. I just want to do one more idea. Then we'll call it a day. In Luke, on this, there's an extra line, and I think it's really additional. So Luke has your eye is a lamp of your body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body is full of light. But if it's not healthy, your body is full of darkness. Same thing. But then it adds in 11:35, therefore consider whether the light in you is not darkness. So we don't have that line in ours. And I think this is also really ups the game of the parable. You might think you're a good person. You might think you've done a ton, but you need to consider whether the light in you is not darkness. Is it really light? Is it darkness? And this is, I think, the introspection that Jesus a lot of times really wants his followers to do. Even the good things that you think you're doing that we see in the Beatitudes may not be as good as you think. Really, the goodness is actually way past you than you normally do. And he even notes, the things that you think that you're doing good is because you've been indoctrinated in a pre-Jesus way that we saw in the Beatitudes. And only if you could exclude those indoctrinations from your attitudes and actually you be the meek, you be the poor, you be the person who's not educated in the way that everyone else has education, can you really access the light? So I think this line from Luke in 11:35 really focuses on this idea that you have to extricate the earlier teachings, the pre-Jesus teachings, the pre-John John the Baptist teachings, and really soak up this kind of super arrogative and black and white and specifically attitude of the Messiah of Jesus in order for you to actually have this light permeate your whole being.
Yeah, now that I think about it, it's a very strong word, right? If your entire body is full of darkness, if the light in you is darkness, the whole body will be full of darkness. That's a very strong word. As you say, there's no middle ground. It's either black, it's either here or there, nowhere in between. And as you mentioned this last verse, the wholeness is out of reach for us, because we've been indoctrinated. So in a sense, it feels like, is humanity condemned? As in, no matter how much you're still going to end up on the side of darkness.
Again, I don't know if the right word is condemned. I think we are supposed to recognize that Jesus's level of perfection as described in the New Testament is unachievable because he's of a different spirit. And when he is prescribing and proscribing different levels of religion and theology, it might be he's describing himself. He's describing the way that he is meant or is or ought to be. And he's describing something that is unachievable, but something that is meant to be sought after. It's unclear. In Jewish tradition, there is that idea that we've spoken many times between sapiential eschatology and the kind of eschatology that has a specific change in the world. In Judaism, the Messianic era, there's also the same exact argument that some midrashim, some stories tell the idea that you will have no evil inclination anymore. We see in the Bible, the sheep, the wolf and the lamb will lie together. There's complete change in the world. And therefore, humans aren't really humans. That's another way to say it. Humans now are more angels. So is Jesus expecting the world to be angelic like he is, or at least the way he's described, or is he expecting the world to be a little bit better than it was before he spoke? It's a good question.
Yeah. Now I can see why people were so angry about him. And I'm gonna read the Bible.
Only now it took the parable of light.
Now,
And
like, oh, here's why people could be so angry about him, and they wanted to kill him. Because without this context, I go, why would people want to kill? Why would people want to be so angry about him? And the verse says the Pharisees were angry, the chief priests were angry, and I didn't know that. But now I think I'm beginning to understand why they were so angry about it. He was pointing to something. He was pointing to.
We already saw when John the Baptist was at the Jordan River. We already saw there's already a vipers calling names and a separation. We already see that there was this idea that there's us and the other that was the Christians at the time would have been defined the other people as the other. So usually when there's, let's use a racist way to say it. Imagine like black people in America being the other, right? And that's how they sometimes are internalized. But imagine that people, black people in America could then define the white person as the other and them as the majority, at least in their head. I think that's what's happening over here. You have like these two peoples who both are claiming elitist or preeminence and viewing the other as the other. So what happens is you almost have like this denigration and this condescension upon both groups. The Pharisees and or Sadducees will look down upon the Christians as stupid heretics wasting their time. And the Christians will look down on the Pharisees and Sadducees and not understanding that the kingdom of heaven is here. So it's really interesting. It's usually one way. Usually one side could look down on the other, and the other side is not as easy because they'll feel so denigrated and they'll feel so downtrodden. It's hard. We also see this with the Dead Sea Scroll people, that the Dead Sea Scroll people just couldn't tolerate the Pharisees and Sadducees, and when they secluded themselves in the caves and in Qumran, they were able to say, like, here's the right way to live life. Here's this messianic time is upon us. Those people were all off the track. So I can't think of any text that tell about how the Pharisees and or Sadducees viewed the Qumran people, but we can imagine that they'd be like, those are the crackheads who live near the caves in Qumran, and those people are like off the rockers. So I feel like it's very interesting when you have those two attitudes go in parallel to one another, which I think is what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
Isaac.
On that note, lots to think about. Have a great Shabbos. Thank you, and glad you had a wonderful fast. And talk to you soon. Thank you.